Okay, we're going to continue with another tutorial on physics, and we're going to use rigid body. And again, this tutorial we're going to make an object slippery. Okay, so before we did one on a bouncy ball, this one we're going to do something called, we're going to do a slippery object. So we're going to add our basic plane, which is going to be like our floor, and then I'm going to have something in here that to be the object. I'm going to use a cube. All right, now let me just start off by, I always do this, I reset the position of the objects to 0, 0, 0, and then I'll just pick up the cube a little bit. I guess I'll have it drop a little bit too, and I'll just move it over this way. And since I'm going to have this do like slipperiness, I guess I want to have something to slide. So I'm going to take the plane and I'm going to turn it a little bit like that, like a hill, so I can have some sliding action, right? So if we remember what we did before, and we wanted to use physics, we have to add a rigid body, and we have to have colliders. So already our objects always have colliders on them when we add them in. The basic objects have the plane has a mesh collider, and the cube has a box collider. The different types of colliders just mean the different shapes that they kind of cover. So I got the collider on the cube and the plane. For the cube, I want to add a rigid body, which is in the physics section, rigid body. And I could just leave the default settings there. And as remember, as soon as we add the rigid body and the gravity box is checked, the cube will drop. And you see it dropped. And now, if I want the cube to be a little bit bouncy, I'm going to have to go to the cube object, and then in the inspector window, have to add a material, a physics material. Right now in my project, I don't have any physics materials in the project window, so I'm just going to right click in the project window and say create a physics material. So this is the physics material I'm going to make for my cube. So I'll say physics cube mat. You know, name whatever I want. Physics cube mat. And 0 is no bouncy, and 1 is full bouncy. So any value between there is how bouncy the cube will be. So I'll make the cube a little bit bouncy. I'll say like 0.5, halfway bouncy. And now if I drop the cube, nothing's going to happen about the bounciness because, you know, I have to put the material on the cube. I keep forgetting that. So I'm going to drag the material and drop it on the box collider. There, so now it says physical cube mat. Now try that again. And I don't really notice anything. Let me pick it up a little higher. I mean, it isn't a ball, it's a cube, right? Let's see. And I only put it to 0.5 bouncy. I don't really notice anything. On the plane, let's also put a material. So the cube could be like 0.5 bouncy, but let's make the plane also a little bit bouncy and see what happens. So I could use the same material and put it on the plane's collider, but I'm going to make another one. That way I could control the physics properties of each individual object. So here I'll say the plane material is going to be here, and are we going to make the plane bouncy too? All right, let's make the ground a little bit bouncy, like you're falling on grass or something, 0.3, or, all right, and now let me play around with that. Don't forget to put the material on. So I go into the hierarchy window and I click plane. Then in the inspector window, I could find the collider object and I could pick the plane material that I just made. All right, both my objects have materials on them. Now let me press play and see what happens. A little bit more bouncy. I want more bouncy. So forget that. I'm just putting these things really bouncy. I'm putting 0.8 here, and I'm putting 0.8 on the plane. Both of them are going to be bouncy. And now I'm going to say play. Oh, now it's pretty bouncy. There you go. And you know the funny thing is, right? The cube bounces and it pays attention to those little corners of it. that is another benefit that the physics engine is doing in Unity. It's paying attention to the corners of the cube. So example, if I added another object in here and I added a sphere, which is like round like a ball, it's going to also, it has a collider that's shaped round like the ball. So I want you just to look here at the ball, and if I say edit the collider, it kind of highlights the collider and you see it's round. If I pick the cube and then I say edit its collider, you're going to see it's a square, it's a cube. And even the plane, the shape of the plane's collider, it's a mesh collider, but what shape is it? It's flat. All right, so here the sphere has a sphere, and let's use the same bounciness on the sphere as I had on the cube. So I select the sphere in the hierarchy, I go to the inspector window and look for a sphere collider, and then I go ahead and try to set the material for the sphere collider, and I'm gonna use the same one I used on cube. Now I have a bounced ball and a bouncer cube, and let me move them back over here a little bit, and they're both gonna drop. And when they drop, oh, what's wrong? Why didn't my sphere drop? It didn't drop because, remember, I need to have a collider and a rigid body. The sphere doesn't have the rigid body yet, so I'm going to add component, physics, rigid body. There you go. Here we go. Let's go. Drop them both now. See, and the cube bounces a little different because it's not round, and the ball bounces like a ball because it's round. All right, so I just wanted you to see that. Now let's go back to the floor, and I'm going to bring the cube down a little closer. I'm going to bring, I'll leave the ball in this example, but let me put it back here because I want us to look at the cube. I'm going to use the cube for sliding to see if it slides on the surface over here. So how do I make the floor slippery? I guess I go to the plane, and here's the plane material. It's using plane mat. All right, plane's using plane mat. So let me look in my project for my plane mat material. I click on it, and here I have dynamic friction and static friction. One of these is how much friction it takes for the object to move from not moving, and the other one is how much friction is in place when the object is moving that's going to make it stop. So let me set the static friction. I'm going to like take off all the friction pretty much, but just leave a little bit. I'm going to put them to like 0.1. And I could also make the cube. It's using pH cube mat. So I'm going to go to pH cube mat, and I could also make the cube slippery, like a bouncy ice cube, if there's such a thing. So I'm going to put that. Also take off the friction on that so it's slippery. And now when I press play, the cube straightens out and it doesn't really slip that much. Maybe let me make the cube heavier. So I'm going to go to the select the cube in the hierarchy, and then the inspector window I look for rigid body, and there's a thing called mass. So mass is where I could set the weight of something. So by default it's a weight of 1, and this isn't pounds or anything, but just think the bigger the number, the heavier it is. So if the cube weighed 1, I just made it weigh 10 times more. So now if it's heavier, should it slide? I think so. Let's see what happens. It's just not sliding. Okay. How about if I make the floor curve a little bit more? Let me just make sure. I got the plane has 0.1.1 with a bounciness 0.8, and the cube has physical material 0.1.18. These tell you friction combined, bounce combined. That tells you the way to combine the properties of the two objects. So if like my cube is bouncy and my floor is bouncy, then it's going to be how much more bouncy. So I could average it, multiply it, take the maximum one and use that. You know, these are different methods, but I'm trying to get my cube to slide down this hill more. Let me just see this one more time. Maybe I have to tilt the floor a little bit more. yeah, let's try tilting the floor a little bit more. So I go into the scene, I select the floor, and I'm going to use the rotate. And now I'll just go on this blue line over here. And you see how it has that little angle showing me how much more I'm rotating. Ooh, imagine I rotated it this much. That's going to slide. But let me just do little changes at a time. Now I'm going to press play. Ooh, sliding. And now let's play around with the slidiness now that we got it sliding. So remember, there's static and dynamic friction. Static friction. I'm going to increase the static friction of my cube to 3. Now let's see what. No, let's make it go up to 5. And now let me press play. I mean 0.5. Now press play. And you see it slides a little less. Will it stop? It doesn't stop. It goes off the edge. But anyway, you can play around with things like this. So say you want to do an ice skating rink floor, and the person is on ice skates. We want to do an ice skating rink floor, and the person has sandpaper for feet. Or you want to have the ground be made of grass, or you want to make a trampoline. Whatever you want the object to act like. When you apply physics, you use a physics material and these few properties, and the Unity engine will calculate the rest for you. That's that.